lost it. It is.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming, taking part of your evening. I know they're difficult times to give off, so truly appreciate it. But I know that what we're talking about tonight is an important topic to you. We all feel it. We all know it. We're fortunate enough tonight to have Dr. Devorah Heitner joining us. And before I share the intro about a little bit about Devorah, something important to note is we first booked her to have this community conversation because we know that is something that's a hot button issue for all of us. And we're talking about screens, and I'm going to be reading off my screen her bio. We could put, and someone earlier said, do I have time to go back out to my car and get my phone? And I must say, no phones tonight. But you see how we can't live without that. We wanted to capitalize on Devorah's time. She was gracious enough to be able to come here and share a message with families. But we said, can you stay a little bit longer and maybe work with our teachers? Because our kids didn't have school yesterday, but our teachers did. So yesterday she worked with our teachers during some professional development time. And we had all K-12 teachers sitting here in the auditorium. She got to talk to them. We also had some time with our elementary teachers, K-5. We broke them out K-2 and 3-5. They started talking about this great time with them. Like, what are they seeing in the classroom? What are we hearing from families at home? And how do we partner together with that? Devorah also had the opportunity to speak to our K-12 guidance counselors today and the things that they're seeing in school counseling across K-12. What are some of the issues that they're seeing and hearing from their kids? But also the counselors were able to talk amongst themselves. And what are we seeing transitionally from elementary to middle school to high school? And that we're hearing and seeing with kids and their own anxieties about screens and cell phones and social media. But also, in addition to that, Dr. Heitner was able to go to all 3 elementary buildings today and meet with our 4th and 5th grade students. So I'm really excited to be able to introduce Dr. Heitner with you. So Dr. Heitner, reading her bio, she's the author of Growing Up in Public, coming of age in a digital world, and we have 15 copies that we will be raffling off today. So that little raffle ticket, that's what those are for. So at the end, we'll be raffling off copies of those. And she's also the author prior to this book, which is her latest, is Screenwise, Helping Kids Thrive and Survive in Their Digital World. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and CNN Opinion. Dr. Heitner has a PhD in Media and Technology and Society from Northwestern University and has taught at DePaul and Northwestern. And she's delighted to be raising her own teenager who's important enough. She's dealing with it too, all these things. And she does come to us from Chicago. So without further ado, Dr. Devorah Heitner.
Okay. It's my pleasure to be with you. And I do know how hard it is to get out on a school night when you have kids to deal with and feed dinner to and supervise activities and homework and all the things. And I see some of us have brought our kids, which is also great. There's nothing here that they can't hear about, so that's good. I don't have any secrets that I'm telling. So I want to start out by just a thought exercise. How many of you have elementary schoolers? How many of you have middle school? How many have high school? How many have grown and flown college and beyond as well? Okay, so a few of you, are you still paying the full bill? Okay, so but they're still in the family phone plan though, right? So it's so connected. So I'm going to really focus on a kind of a milestones approach that really is relevant throughout the sort of K-12 experience, knowing that some kids are kind of at the beginning of just maybe playing with your own phone and tablet. Obviously they have their devices from school some of the time. And then some kids are playing things like sugar-based games like Roblox and Minecraft. Some kids have phones. How many of you have kids who are texting? How many kids who are texting? Okay. How many of them have texted you today? Been like, what's for dinner? Where is it? When are you coming to get me? When are you, right? So there's a lot going on with our kids and tech at every age. A lot to think about. And I'm going to share some of the things that I learned in doing my interviews and research for Growing Up in Public. And then I will also take questions. And so I'm happy to answer your questions. And I'm sure there are a lot of reasons that people came out tonight. So hopefully that most of the things I'll say will be kind of relevant to something you're thinking about. And even for those with little kids where some of this is maybe not happening just yet, how hopefully it's relevant to think about what are the skills I want to nurture in my kid and the experiences, and also what I want to model at home with my own use of phones, computers, tablets, that is going to make an impression on them, right? Because you're always modeling for your kids. They're always seeing you, right? So if you like text to drive, they see you, right? So it's good to be aware of that. I'm teaching my own 15-year-old to drive right now, which is aging me rapidly and terrifying. And that experience is making me think about everything I've ever modeled in the car ever, right? Everything I've ever modeled in the car ever. So it's just something to think about. If you have, little people, it's like a good time to think about that kind of going forward. So there's a bunch of areas where technology touches our lives and our kids' lives. So the first one is, and of course, relationships, right? They're navigating first their relationship with you, but also if they're FaceTiming the grandparents, if they're, playing Roblox with friends on a server, if they are testing with friends, if their friends come over. And today we talked in the 4th and 5th grade about like if you have different rules from your friends, what can you do if like you're allowed to play a certain game but your friend isn't? And they come over to your house and they're like, oh, can we play whatever? And you're like, oh, I'm not allowed to play that. Right? And so we kind of talk to it. How can you have that conversation, right? The kids have really good ideas like, oh, we could suggest something else. We could just go outside. We could play a board game. We could play a different game they're allowed to play, right? So none of them were like, they know what to say, but they're also because like nobody was like, oh, they don't have to tell their parents, right? Nobody said that, right? No, it's with 4th and 5th graders, not 8th graders, right? So it's like different ages are really different on this. Obviously, kids are going to have more of an independent relationship with authority, a test authority more, and we expect that, and that's, developmentally typical to expect with adolescents. But it's good to know that at least in the 4th and 5th grade, their response was like, oh, what could I do to make my friend feel comfortable and welcome? And I wouldn't push them to play something they're not allowed to play, right? So that's good. And that also tells us that there are some positive things about kind of starting to set that culture at a young age, right? That we don't want to wait until high school to have these tough conversations with our kids about technology. We're always thinking about how does this fit into our lives? How can we use this, right, in a positive way? So one of the tricky things about relationships these days that our kids are missing is they're not hearing us on the phone. How many of you remember hearing your parents on the phone? How many of you ever picked up the other extension? I got both sides. I was nosy. But we also lived in a small space. My parents were loud, right? So I learned a lot about what's going on with the family, with my mother and her friendships, with work, mostly friendships and family, because work didn't call that much in the old days. And I could know what was going on. And I could also hear like how my parents would get off the phone with people. I could hear when my mother wanted to end a call, like the way her voice would change, right? It's so nice talking to you, right? She could start drawing out her syllables. I was like, well, she wants to go, right? She's got places to be. And we are summing out our lives in front of our kids. Our kids are not hearing us on calls the same way that we heard our parents. So one of the things we need to do is some of the time, we always hand our kids our phones. They don't even want to read our text, pretty much, right? They're not interested. And if they did, they'd be like, well, this is so boring. But we want to let them know some of the time when how we're dealing with situations like, whoa, this is big news. Let's wait till we're at Grammy's house. We don't want her to get this news when she's home alone. Let's wait till we're over there together so we can tell her. We'll wait till Uncle Arnie's over there and then we'll call up and we'll all talk, right? So these are the kinds of things that we had talked through. Or I was at work today and somebody kind of dropped a bomb in my inbox and I was pretty freaked out and I was like this, and then I was going to write back real fast, and then I realized that when I do that, sometimes that doesn't go well. So instead, I walked over to them and said, hey, can we talk later, right? And we made a plan to talk it through so that we could work it out, right? Or you can tell them about things that have gone wrong, like that one time you did BCC, and, things went a little off, in an email chain, or somebody who maybe kind of blew up a little on, Slack, right? Like we want to talk to our kids about our experiences of communication and how we're making and also how we put out fires that start, because it's inevitable that we'll have conflicts and misunderstandings with people. But our kids sometimes don't know how to work that out. So even with the 4th and 5th graders, and even with, 3rd grader, 2nd grader, right, we could talk about, hey, if you're in a misunderstanding with someone that maybe starts on Roblox or starts at a group text, we can still talk that out in person. That becomes important in high school when your kid might be dating. Like if you're like in a misunderstanding with like your best friend or your sweetie that you're going out with, whether that's been a week or a month or, so some high school relationships apparently last for years, but many last in weeks, right? But if you're in a misunderstanding, do you want to hash that out over text? You do not, right? You want to try to talk in person because that's where you're going to get to yes, that's how you're going to get to understanding. That's how you're going to get on the same page, and you can see how the person's responding to you, right? So we'll talk more about texting in a little bit, but relationships are so important. And it's like, also it's cute when your 4-year-old is on FaceTime with grandma and then they just like get interested in something and they walk away. It's kind of like, oh, funny, that's so cute. It's not that cute when they're 12. Right? It's not really cute to like walk away from a call. So we have to teach our kids like, how do you close out a call? Okay, bye, grandma. I was really talking to you, right? You don't just walk away, right? How many of you have been hung up on by your kids? Not in anger, but just like they're done talking to you, so they just click, right? Like to us as adults, like hanging up on someone is like a high level, like, I am really mad at you. I'm hanging up on you. For the kids, unless we teach them, they're like, can you come pick me up? We say yes, click. Like, no, that's not how you do it, right? So we have to help them get there. We have to teach them how do we deal with, phone calls. Like, it doesn't have to be a long call, but you got to say, okay, thanks, bye, mom, see you soon, right? You got to close out the call. All right, reputation is another thing to worry about. How many of you wish there were more photos and videos of you from middle school on the internet? Right, most of us are glad to not be immortalized and famous from a young age, right? And we're glad that our middle school years and even our high school and college years, maybe we were known in our community in some ways, but we weren't necessarily like searchable in the same way. And many of the, let's say, we're passing like most brilliant thoughts we had would be only known by our immediate friend group, right? And you can remind those friends, like say you still know your middle school friends, like I still know some of my. You could be like, oh, remember when you went through this phase or that phase, but there's not like extensive documentation where that person like, you run for office and they're like, here's this video, right? Our kids are living in a different world. They are more documented. There are pictures and videos. So in a sense, they're experiencing some of the downsides, like how all those child celebrities get to be adults and they write about how stressful it was. It's not quite like that for our kids because they're all experiencing about the same level of surveillance, but they are experiencing some of those downsides of sort of child celebrities, of like being searchable, depending on how much you share them, right? Because you might be sharing them before they're sharing themselves. It could be more than we think, right? Another challenge of growing up in the digital age is self-esteem, where we can measure how many people like our photos. We can measure how many people follow us. And in some apps, it's also public. Like I could pull up somebody else's, Insta and be like, oh, they have more followers than me, right? And we can play that comparison game and measure our clout and our influence. And that's a lot to deal with as kids. And a big inoculation we can give as parents is giving kids jobs in the home that matter, like chores actually are good for self-esteem. And that's a real, like feeding the cat, making your own lunch, making, for other people, putting away your own laundry, empty the dishwasher. And our kids have it pretty easy, relatively speaking, in terms of like history, in terms of time and place. Like I also had it pretty easy, but like I look at my kid, he's 15, he's big and strong, he's taller than me. Like if we did have a farm, he could be out milking the cows, but like he's just emptying the dishwasher. He's just taking out the trash. It's not really, too arduous, right? Our kids are not being asked to do it, but like just keeping a houseful going helps them have good self-esteem. Also, independence is good for self-esteem. Riding your bike places, right? Walking somewhere you haven't walked to, figuring something new out, figuring out how to solve your own problems, using your foreign language for the first time, right? Asking a stranger for directions and figuring out how to solve that kind of problem. Taking public transit, learning to drive. These are all good for self-esteem, like independence, efficacy, and make helpful. And that balances out a little bit of the like numbers game of something like Instagram or Snapchat, right? Just having a sense that you matter in the world is a good counterbalance. Another thing to do is just kind of talk about how, funny or weird it is, right? Like my own social media sort of number stress has been mostly greater than my kid because I've been publishing books. So there's all this pressure for like Penguin Random House, like get more followers, right? And so every once in a while I'll be talking about that and my 15-year-old will be like, aren't you supposed to just care about like actual friends and not followers? It's not like, and I'm like, I know. Right. So it's good to have a teenager in your house who can like show you the hypocrisy of your holiness. It's very helpful. Another issue for all of us really is time management. So many of us have sat down to our computer to accomplish something and ended up doing something else. Right. And then like something else takes like an indefinite amount of time that's always like just like more than we think. Whatever it is, like we sat down with some teenagers last night from the high school and they were talking about 5 minutes turning into 45 minutes. I'm like, what about when 5 minutes turns into 5 hours, y'all? Like that's happened to me where I'm like, I watched the entire season of a show on Netflix and I just thought I would just check out the show. And it's like, if it's a good show, sometimes, right? And so how do we control for that? Right? Well, a lot of it is about making plans. What I've learned is 5 more minutes is meaningless for me. So I have to make clock times. Like I'm going to meet up with my family at 8 o'clock and we're all going to watch The Simpsons, or I'm going to eat dinner with my husband at 7 o'clock, or I'm going to, get out the door this time. And then I have to hold myself to that clock time. As if I'm just setting a timer on myself for like how many more minutes, it's really easy to just keep going. Right? But everyone has different strategies that work. The 4th and 5th graders talked about how they know it's time to take a break. So here's some of the ways they know. If my legs are falling asleep, my eyes are watering, if the machine gets too hot, do you know how long you have to be on one of those things before it gets really hot, right? What else did they say? They said if my head starts to hurt, and in every group, one of them would say again, like when my brain starts to, and then they would like grasp for they didn't know what the word was, because it's like, what does your brain do? But it's like when your brain starts to feel a little fried is what I would say. But they were saying kind of when your brain starts to, right? And that's a good time to take a break. To come back to, time management, like a lot of times we're trying to do our work at the sign of the party. Like we're literally sitting down to a laptop that has windows that have areas of very high interest. And whatever you're trying to do, like pay your quarterly taxes or whatever, it's just not as interesting as this other thing. And so you're going to get distracted. So what can you do to set yourself up for success? And the kids talked about like having rules where you only have one device at a time, not trying to open a lot of windows. Some of them talked about doing things on paper. Amazing, right? So that could really be a good strategy. We want to give our kids chances to try and practice self-regulation. Right? You might think if you let your kid have unrestricted access to like a tablet or something, they will never take a break. But actually the kids today did talk about like getting indicators. They also talked about their parents. Like I said, who, how to remember to take a break. And a bunch of kids were like, my parents, my mom, right? So like they do also know that you guys are there to help them. But it's great to hear like one girl said at one school, sometimes I remember to take a break. Sometimes my mom reminds me. And that's a great place to be in 5th grade, where it's like you are starting to self-regulate, because as you get to middle school, as you get to high school, you want to be self-regulating some of the time, and you want to try to do those experiments with your kids to see, if you're home summer or on the weekend and you have a little bit of flexibility, like how long will they really actually play Roblox? How long will they actually really, watch YouTube videos? And you may be nervous to do that experiment. That's fine. You don't have to, right? Nothing I suggest. It was like you have to try. But it could be interesting to see, like, will they ever just be done? Will they ever be like, I'm taking a break? One of the things I also suggested is a lot of kids are using YouTube to learn skills. You can go actually try the skill, right? You can try it out. Another aspect of growing up in the digital age is we're seeing more pictures of ourselves. Our kids are growing up seeing more pictures of themselves. And for some kids, that could be a bit stressful. For many kids, it's kind of neutral because it's sort of a universal, like everybody's seeing more pictures of themselves. But, I grew up with like the once-a-year wallet size and really just the birthday pictures, maybe some holidays. There was not like extensive documentation. And especially once I got past like the baby years, right? Like, so middle school, for example, there's like a few pictures here and there, bat mitzvah, well documented, a couple for family events, birthdays, but definitely not like an extensive archive. And one of the nice things about that, especially in years of puberty, is you don't have a like before, middle, and after. Like you're not like kind of examining your body closely at that time. It's kind of maybe good to be more in your body versus looking at your body in those years. So it's something to think about is like how much do we want to be photographing and sharing our kids? Because for some kids, there could be the risk that if it's too much, it can, give them too much focus on that. Now, I just want to clarify, most kids are 5. So this is not something that, if you're photographing your kid, then your kid will have issues around this. It's more like, if you see that your kid is having issues around this, one thing you can do is photograph them a little less, share a little less. And another thing, or if you're just nervous about it, right? Like, or think about, especially in the sort of puberty years, like maybe more face than body, right? Just think about like, how much do you really want them to be kind of looking at themselves, right? And then they're also then taking pictures of one another, and that can also be stressful for some kids. And so another thing we really want to do is make sure we are having a consent-based policy. So if you're posting baby pictures of your kid on their birthday, check with them if it's okay. If you're posting their gymnastics or soccer tournament, make sure it's okay. If your kid is saying no, I think it's really important to honor that, because you want them to know that their consent matters and that their boundaries will be respected, because you want them to bring that to all their other relationships and feel like if someone asks them for a picture of any kind, right, like a regular picture or maybe like a reveal-like picture, any kind of picture, that they could be like, no. And what I told the kids in 4th and 5th grade, and you can tell your kids of any age, you don't have to have a reason. If someone wants to take or share a picture of you, you can just say no thanks. You don't actually, like, your friends don't need to justify why they don't want to be on your YouTube channel, why you can't put them on TikTok. It's really just a consent situation, and you never want to assume consent. Like, obviously, if everyone's going like this and you have your camera out, like, you can pretty much guess. Like, I'm not expecting 15-year-olds to have like a 3-page, consent release for their friends when they're out doing something. But if a friend is going like this, if a friend is saying no, or if you're not sure if you can post it, saying like, hey, can I put this on Insta? Can I put this on Snap? Right? And if they say no, just, that's it. Another thing I talk to kids about with Snapchat is sharing your location. So I'll come back to that later. But right now, I just want you to think about digital footprint, ask your kids for consent, and if in doubt, don't share it out. The other thing I would say is I did to interview a number of kids for growing up in public who were teased by peers for things their parents posted. So even if your kid says yes, if you think it might be embarrassing later, maybe don't put it out there. Right? Maybe share it just in the family, maybe just print the copy and, put it in the album. When your kid breaks home their, future spouse, you can show them the pictures, but maybe they don't need to be like searchable on the internet, right? So if our kids are doing this, that's a sign. I talked to the kids today about texting, right? Everybody's in a different place, or some of our 4th and 5th graders are texting. Quite a few of them are texting in some way or other, even if it's just in a school computer or the school docs. Certainly, almost all the middle schoolers I would talk to in most places are texting. If high schoolers are texting. The thing about texting is it's really easy to get into a conflict or a misunderstanding. And when I ask kids today, when I ask kids in general, like, why is that? Why is it so easy to get offended when we text? To have a misunderstanding, to be mad? They're like really clear. Okay, no tone. You don't have vocal tone. And then, I'll also add, you don't have body language. You don't have facial expression. Some of the kids also pointed out typos and autocorrects, right? You also don't always have real time. So sometimes I text somebody and they text me back, and we're in the middle of texting and then maybe they leave for a while. Or if there's a group text, maybe I'm gone for a few hours and they come back and I'm like re-entering this conversation that's been going at full speed, right? And so all of these things can make it very different than an in-person conversation. Right. And it's just much easier to misunderstand. And the other thing we don't have is we don't see the person's reaction. So we can't modulate what we're saying. Right. So if I'm talking to you and I see you're getting tense or offended, I could say, oh, did I say something wrong? Like, I could kind of modulate what I'm saying because I see your response. If I'm texting and I'm offending someone, I could just keep going and going and going. I have no idea that the person on the other side is having a reaction. Right. And sometimes too, I think, it's fair to say kids are craving, having responsiveness from other people. And we don't know, is that developmental? Is that academic effect that kids were isolated and now they're wanting all this response from others? But sometimes there is a little bit of pot stirring, especially in a group text, and especially I would say in middle school, 6th, 7th grade, you can see that, which is kind of like a middle school thing, like how kids always were, what can I say to sort of up the ante here? But on the text situation, it's also then becomes really easy to ruminate on that later, right? So you could go back and read it again, really feel offended, and that is you could kind of escalate the situation in various ways, unfortunately. So we want to teach kids, hey, there's another human being on the other end of these communications, So if in doubt, check it out. If in doubt, talk to the person, right? Reach out, say, hey, like I'm setting a boundary with you, right? I really don't want you to use that nickname anymore. I don't use that nickname anymore. Or I really don't, the kind of language is okay with me. Or we're going to get in trouble if the conversation keeps going down this road. Those are all really valid things to point out. And they can do that and set those boundaries. And then they can take further steps like involving an adult, especially if they're younger. Getting out of the group text is a good one that a couple of them mentioned today, but it's a good one to remind kids they have the option to leave a group text situation. If it's getting toxic, if it's getting mean, right? They don't have to stay for that. And it's good for kids to know, that, hey, I've got choices. Now, a lot of kids, especially the 4th and 5th graders I was with today, when they talk about getting mad at each other, we're like, oh, you can block them. If they're in the game with you, you could kick them out of the server. That's like next level. You can do that, but that should not be the first thing. Like your friend spams you too many emojis. You should not just block them. And this is what I would say, especially with like 6th and 7th graders, is like, how many of 6th and 7th graders have a friend who 80% of the time is pretty great, but 20% of the time is quite difficult, quite annoying? Everyone has that friend. Everyone is that friend, right? If you're in 6th grade, I mean, we're all a little bit annoying some of the time, but let's say it's 6th grade, like that 80-20 rule is like generous, right? It might be more like 50-50. But like, if that's the kid you sit at the lunch table with and you basically like each other and they basically have your back, even if they are sometimes annoying and spamming too many emojis, blocking them is not the solution, right? You want to talk it out. You want to like give them some guidance. You do not want to just block and run away. Same thing with game. Like someone does something annoying in the game, just kicking them off the server is the nuclear option. That's the option you'd use after you've tried everything else. After you've talked to them, you've explained, please don't, blow up my house in Minecraft. No, really, I mean it. If you do that, I'm going to kick you out of the server. And then, okay, 3 strikes and then you do like say, I'm going to play with other people for now, or I'm going to not. When we hang out, we're not going to do Minecraft because when you do it, you keep blowing up my stuff, right? But it's not the first thing you do. And we need to teach kids, like, I think the old school kind of ideas of digital citizenship, a lot of them were like very nuclear, like if you mess up once, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. That's not really helpful. I think we need to talk to kids about repair a lot more than we currently do. And talk to kids also about giving people really explicit information about what they need to do to get better. Because we all want to, none of us want to get kicked out of the server. And we don't even know that it was all those emojis, right? It's like, please tell me what I did so I can fix it. And these are some of the challenges that regularly come up between kids of different ages. This is an app. I work with kids a lot, and they sometimes will design apps, like draw pictures of apps and color. This app helps kids get positive. As they're down or having a hard time, I love this app. A lot of kids have talked to me over the years about wanting an app that sort of stops you from sending mean messages. And sometimes it's like a little timer, like, that looks like a mean message. Do you want to take 2 breaths and like reconsider that for the next 20 seconds before you send? And I feel like most of us have probably sent at least one email in our lives that would be good if like there had been like a pause button of like, do you really want to send this email, or would this be a better conversation? Do you want to sleep on this? One clue is if you're ever typing the words, as I have said in my previous communication, that is a clue something is going wrong in that moment. You can still send the email, but like, just know, like, it probably isn't going to get better from there. Like we're not going down a good road at that point, right? Most of our kids are spending a lot of time at any age on TikTok and YouTube and these other kind of algorithmic-based short video platforms. A lot of what's there is really fun. We know that TikTok is maybe in and out of being banned. I think this week there's still TikTok. Who knows what the future of TikTok is? My author friends who have major presences on TikTok are very concerned. Other people would be thrilled if it's banned, right? I'm kind of neutral. Like I actually have a TikTok, but I haven't posted it in a really long time. So I certainly will not be like undone if TikTok is gone, but I do follow a lot of people there that I enjoy and think are interesting, right? It's complicated. TikTok, YouTube are very algorithmic driven, and they would like TikTok in particular is the app that when I was hearing up in public, more kids told me they had quit or taken a break from it, any other app. They did find it, and they don't even call it addictive, which sounds more passive. They would say it's addicting, which almost seems like it's reaching out and taking you right with it. I'm not even sure if addicting is a word, but like many teenagers told me TikTok is addicting. So interesting, right? So what does that mean? Well, the algorithm is really good. It doesn't just know you like cats, it knows you like orange cats. And it knows you like funny videos of orange cats, preferably with jazz music, and you'll watch 30 seconds of any of that, but only 20 seconds if it's another kind of cat, right? Like TikTok knows your brain more than we probably know our brains. That's why algorithm is either really amazing or really creepy, depending on how you look, how you feel about being known like that. YouTube is also a really strong algorithm. It also sends us a lot of content that we're probably interested in. But the kids in particular seem to feel like TikTok is even better somehow at like deeply getting them. In both apps, you can see stuff that you would never want to see, that your children shouldn't see, that you don't want to see, right? And stop talking about both explicit content, but I'm also about violence. I'm about all kinds of things, misinformation, hateful content, right? Content that's trying to draw you into hateful perspectives, content that's trying to misinform you. That's what's so intense about YouTube and TikTok is the algorithm is amazing until the algorithm is sending you down a really bad road, right? And so this is my slide that illustrates that where we see Candace. I think any one of us with kids of any age would be comfortable with our kids watching a video of Candace, right? Well, could be cuter than Pandas, very little. Over on the right, it suggests that women in religious cults might be a good nudge stop. Well, if I'm in second grade, I don't have the life skills or context or reading level to know what women in religious cults is, or even necessarily all those words. But if I'm 5, I definitely don't know, so I might just click on it. And if I'm at 8th grade, I might be like, ooh, women in religious cults from Conspiracy Dot. I always thought they were slinging adults were Tony, click, right? So that kindergartner, that 2nd grader, that 8th grader might be going down that road. And I can guarantee if you click on women in religious cults, you are going down a gross road on YouTube. Like, it's not going to be good. The suggested videos are not going to be good. And then if you keep clicking on those, you could be seeing all kinds of things that, again, you may not want to see, might be deeply misinformed, might be very troubling in all kinds of different ways. So ideally, for my single kids, my 0 to 9s, if you can be in the room with them when they're YouTubing, even if you're not like right there, like maybe you're making dinner or, doing something else, but maybe they're not using headphones and in the room with you, I think that's better than like them being in their room doing YouTube, because just having an adult in the room for kids is kind of a grounding situation. Like, kids usually have an instinct if this is content that maybe is not great for kids, and you being in the room is a good reminder. And you can hear stuff, right? So you could be like, what's that, right? And you can kind of be walking by, looking over their shoulder, and yeah.
Well, doesn't you have to be like something like upsetting or religious women? It could be Mickey Mouse and Nakisi Farms. Or
I know. So Peppa Pig, yes. And this is why YouTube Kids is not the magical solution, because we found that there's even some gross content on YouTube Kids. Now, YouTube Kids, theoretically, for like the 0 to 5s, is going to be a little bit more kid-friendly. But even so, like any app that has users adding content all the time, like as we are sitting here this evening, hundreds of thousands of people are uploading stuff to YouTube.
what do you do about the cat?
I'm sorry?
What is the solution?
The solution is to talk to your kids about what they click on, or you can keep them on certain channels. If there's like, say there's a channel they love to watch where it's someone like doing science experiments or making slime or cooking, and you've seen that channel before and you're portable, you can either encourage them or lock them down to that channel. So that's one thing. You could say no YouTube. I would say YouTube is really hard to kind of totally avoid because it is so ubiquitous in the kind of kid and teen culture. And there's a lot of useful stuff. I mean, for every kid who's been exposed to like 1 or 2 VIX that is super gross, there are kids who've like learned really valuable skills. The last week, a kid told me she learned to tie her shoes from YouTube. I mean, cooking, repairing drywall, solving a Rubik's Cube, right? Kids are learning all kinds of skills from YouTube. So I'm not here to say YouTube is perfect or YouTube is terrible. I'm here to say, like, this is a yellow light app. I would say, like, all the way up, like, exercise caution. And I definitely would say, if I had a bunch of 8-year-olds over, I wouldn't be like, why don't you all go up to your room and get on YouTube? Because the other thing is, when there's a collective group of kids, even more likely that you could end up going down. Because, like, with that one kid's curiosity, and so when we think about things like explicit content, another thing that's really important is we inoculate our kids by giving them age-appropriate information that they need about things like puberty, right? We don't want them looking for that information online. We want them to get that information from us, from their pediatrician, right? And I think it's really important that we make sure that we are informing kids about things they need to know about so they're not going to the internet to look, right? Yeah.
What's the language that you have found to be really effective with my kids' tech, right? You read a bunch of stuff about how by the time a kid is 12, they've been exposed from anywhere from 5 to 12 exposures of some sort of inappropriate or explicit content, nudity, severe profanity, severe violence, and things like that. Like I said, what kind of language are they using with kids of that age to not getting like so much information, especially in a single child, right? You tend to talk to them like in the third adult room sometimes, where you're not going to, I'm the hammer, I say everything, but you're also not getting them carte blanche where you're like, okay, I'm trying to trust you until you're like, shit, right?
So I think it's really important to say there's stuff on there that's not for kids and stuff on there that I don't even want to see. So really, I mean clearly like the elephant in the room, like one other thing for talking about is things like pornography. I think it's really important to actually be direct about that at a certain point with kids. You can decide if that's at 10 or later, but to be like, this is why I don't want you to look at that, and to really have pragmatic reasons, right? Like it could misinform you about consent. Some of the people involved with that industry haven't been videoed by their own consent, so you might actually be watching violence or exploitation taking place. Like these are some reasons to talk to kids about why not to consume that content. And we might think, oh, I have a girl, I need to talk about it. Well, girls are seeing it. We might think, oh, my kid is young. Well, we know the first age of exposure could be quite low. So yeah, the best inoculation against that kind of content really is giving kids the information they need in an age-appropriate way. And we need to know the new puberty. And my friends Cara Natterson, and her co-author Vanessa Cole-Bennett with this great book called This Is So Awkward about puberty. And the new puberty is younger than we think. So we're like waiting to 12 to talk about puberty. It's kind of late to start the conversation. That's it, right? So we do need to inform kids. And truly, every family is different. And I've been to very many different communities where people feel really differently about this. So your own values are going to inform what you do. But one option I'm just going to tell you right now that you do not have that our parents had is, I didn't hear the question. I'm just going to ignore the question. And I want you to instead practice deep breath if your kid asks you about any tough topic. Not just sex, not just death, not just what's going on in the world, any tough topic. I'm so glad you asked. Even if you're not. Because that buys you a little time and you want to answer because you do not want your kid to just Google it. Right? You do not want your kid to just Google it. When my son was in 6th grade, we moved from one school district to another. One was District 65, and then we moved to District 69. His friends were like, pfft. He was like, why, Mom? Are my friends laughing at us because we're moving to District 69? And I was like, I could have just been like, I don't hear you, or that's not appropriate, or your friends there's something wrong with your friends, what's wrong with now? But I had to answer the question because the last thing I wanted was for my 6th grader to go Google the answer to that question and see something that he couldn't unsee, right? And that's really important. Like, you have to really be glad your kid asked and tell them in an age-appropriate way, right? And there's a way to do that that doesn't involve sort of scoring them for like. And the other thing is I started answering, and then I was like, do you want to know more? Do you know enough now? He's like, I know enough, thank you. That's plenty, like, right? And that's great. That's great. That's a good solution. But it's hard to be a parent in this age. How many of you remember what you weren't allowed to watch? What were you not allowed to watch? Yeah.
Oh, I married children.
How many of you wish the most risque, out there thing in the world your kid could see is Married with Children? Wouldn't you be like dying of gratitude? What else were you not allowed to watch? Ren and Stimpy, right? Anyone wasn't allowed to watch The Simpsons? Like, now I watch The Simpsons with my 15-year-old for like wholesome, good family times. Right? Yeah.
It's not, we don't have to worry about as much because there were 8 o'clock, it was found appropriate. Now, 8 o'clock in the morning, you could get anything you want, though 8 o'clock p.m.
Right. Now, of course, the broadcasters made it a lot easier. Even if our parents literally did nothing, right? Cable changed that a little bit, But even if our parents did nothing, especially broadcast TV, I mean, where I lived when I was really little, went off the air at a certain point, right? So it was a very different, like you could not stay up all night and binge your show because literally that possibility did not exist. And then like VCRs and cable and all of that stuff started changing things, right? And early MTV. My first students when I taught college starting like 15 years ago were kind of like the MTV generation. And they all had these stories about the garage door opening. Like, when did you stop watching the thing you weren't supposed to watch, which for them was all MTV pretty much? And they would hear the garage door and then they'd like turn it off, right? But your kids are on their phones or on these tiny little devices. So all you have to do is put in your headphones and you could be doing anything. So we do have a harder job than our parents. If your parents are like, but is this so hard for you? You can say like, it is, this piece is really hard. Like the fact that your kids can see these things on YouTube is hard. Okay, but your kids are learning. So if they're learning stuff, if they're learning to cook, if they're learning to craft, please have them do it, right? Go to the store with them and like with a list of ingredients that they create from like, if they're watching a baking show, like have them make a ingredients list or get them a kid's recipe book. Or if they're a teenager, get them a regular cookbook and go to the store with them and like have them, you know, figure out like where do these things work. By the way, like walking around a grocery store finding stuff is a good skill, right? And then, you know, budgeting for a meal, making the meal. Your kid will be the most popular kid in their college dorm if they're making, you know, homemade pasta, if they're making cookies, right? Like these are great skills to have. I was the kid who got to art school, couldn't boil water, and I could tell you, like, I wish I had learned like even a tiny little bit of cooking. And a lot of the 4th and 5th graders, I heard, okay, I asked at least one group what they can make because they were talking about cooking. And one kid said eggs, another kid said pasta, get him meatballs, other kid said chicken nuggets, but I'm guessing he's talking about microwaving. But okay. Another kid said cereal, and I was like, I'm not sure I'm gonna count that. I was like adding milk to cereal, but then I was like, wow, that's a food group. Anyway, just to say, like, they are making some food, and we can encourage that. Like, we want our kids to take the skills. If they're learning to braid hair, you know, on YouTube, like, and you're willing to be the guinea pig, let them experiment with braiding your hair. Let them do your makeup. Let them, you know, if they're wanting to try more drawing, like, make sure they have stuff, you know, around, which is really just like paper or pencil at the most basic. And, you know, we sometimes we feel like every activity our kid tries, we need to get them like the world's best, most awesome, you know, equipment, right? And we have to put them in a class, but just giving them the space to like try stuff. Another thing that's really important to remember is the reason all of us are so hooked on Netflix and YouTube and stuff is it gave us novelty. And it gave us novelty in the pandemic or we're going out and doing anything. It gives us novelty now. And we all want novelty. Human beings crave novelty. But for kids, like, truly, you can take away the magnet tiles and put them in the attic and bring them back out the next week, and that's novelty. It'll be like a winter holiday in your house. You can take away the smelly markers and put out the watercolors and then switch them back in 3 weeks, and that's novelty, right? We don't have to, like, I mean, some of you might have really lucky kids. You've been to other countries or been all over the United States or, you know, that's awesome. But, like, novelty could be a new playground that you haven't visited before that has some cool news that, you know what I mean? So we don't have to give our kids these like huge things. Going to the library is like a free source of novelty that you could do every single week and you can just go get free books and it's amazing, right? And when your kids discover that, you know, and especially when they can start getting into like reading in their areas of interest or going into different parts of the library, like that's just like such a mind-blowing thing for them. So it's just good to remember because I think the reason YouTube and all this stuff is so attractive, a lot of it is novelty. When I showed this slide to the kids, they all freaked out because a lot of them are Minecraft players. Even your older teenagers probably are still playing games, many of them. What's interesting about games now is they're much more inclusive. Like we saw more, you know, sort of specific kinds of kids and especially boys playing games once upon a time, like when I was a kid in the 1980s. Now we see girls and boys play games, kids of all interests playing games, partly because the games themselves, there's way more kinds of games. If you look at the Roblox suite of games, there's games about adopting animals, right? They're not all just like shoot this game, win by taking over the planet game. There's all, even games like Minecraft, there's like the zombies that attack and you could do that. Or you could just play and build worlds and build buildings and do all these cool things that are, you know, gonna be really great for like future engineers. So there's just a lot of really neat things about games. One of the things that's really great about games is they adapt and get more difficult as the person playing gets better. So they really adapt to your skill level, which is like super cool learning because the cost of failure is low, right? If your character dies, so just start again at the next level. which is amazing, right? Which is an amazing experience. So it's really important to think about, if my kid is gaming, what kind of experience are they having? Who are they gaming with? Are they gaming on a public server with people they don't know? Are they gaming with their friends from school? Are they at esports? Is there esports here? Do you know what esports is? Okay, maybe they're not. Some high schools have like competitive video game night. My son's high school has it. He's not in it, but he's got friends and they do like esports. And y'all, there are esports scholarships. In case you did not, so if you're like mourning that your kid is not a jock, you're like, I was a jock, but my kid is a gamer. Well, your kid might actually be like, able to get a scholarship for video games. They certainly can maybe go into video game design. I know a lot of kids say they want to do that, and as adults, we might be sort of skeptical, but like, it is probably no way. Certainly, it is not less realistic than thinking professional sports. I'll put it that way. It is probably more realistic as a job option. Right, if you think about like if your kid, but like how many of us who play sports growing up are actually going to like do that as our job, right? Not too many. So, it's worth thinking about. If your kid is really curious about that, those are great things, especially in middle school or high school, is to start talking to people who are in that industry. Like, if you know someone in the Philadelphia gaming industry, like see if they could, see if you could send your kid to go have a conversation with them about what this is really like. If your kid is playing games on a public server and they're little, like elementary school or maybe 6th grade, you definitely want to, again, try to be adjacent to that some of the time, maybe no headphones so you can know, like, who are they talking to? The further 5th graders seem to have good, like, smarts about it, but for older kids, they really may meet people that they don't know on there. And, if you have a 16-year-old who's relatively savvy and they want to play on a public server with people they don't know, that might be fine, right? If you have an 8-year-old and they want to play on a public server with people they don't know, that might not be okay with you. So you really want to look at, is my kid ready to be doing that? If they're playing with kids they do know, are they talking to them in a nice way? How's that going? And again, as kids get older, we might worry about, is this getting in the way of other stuff? Right? Because sometimes the demands on our older kids are greater, right? So the 4th and 5th graders, the teachers told me they have between 30 and 45 minutes of homework. And sometimes less. But your high schooler might have a few hours. Right? So that's a kid who probably does not have time to do extensive gaming, on top of everything else that they're doing on weeknights, unless it's going to cut into sleep, which we don't want. So it's just something that, like gaming, something we want to think about all of that. Another thing to think about with games is talking to kids about the design of the games and the ways that games have the near-miss phenomenon and no end point. So near-miss phenomenon is, you've ever known anyone who had a gambling issue or really liked it or whatever, the house always wins, right? But you go into like a casino in Indiana or Las Vegas or whatever, and you're gonna eventually lose money probably because the house always wins. It's designed to be a profitable industry. Well, the way that most of the gambling games keep you at the gambling table is the near-miss phenomenon, where the game is designed to make you feel like you almost won. Almost all video games have a similar design. So when your kid says, I'm almost gonna get to the next level, I can't come to dinner just now, please know that the game is actually designed to make them believe that. Sometimes they might be snowing you. If you know the game, you can be like, dude, you haven't even killed the first night. Like you're nowhere near level 6, like come to dinner. So it's helpful if you can like know the game. But even if you don't know the game, know that your kid may genuinely feel like, I'm about to, defeat this thing. And they may not be, right? So that's a design issue, and it's good to talk to kids about that. Some kids mentioned Discord today. Kids are using Discord when they're playing games. They're also using, when they're talking, to play games. So if I'm playing Roblox with my friends, or if I'm playing whatever game with my friends, Hearts of Iron 4, Minecraft, whatever, I'm talking to my friends, I might be either on a voice chat with the speakerphone on, I might be on a Google Hangout, or I might be on this app called Discord. So the reason I'm sharing Discord is it's a little less familiar to some parents. And here, this is a Discord for girls. What's wrong with this picture? Why would I be concerned about this? If you have a girl, why would you be like not super psyched maybe about them joining a girls' Discord? If it's not moderated, we don't know that they're girls, right? And unfortunately, we all know that there are adult bad people who have bad intent, who might want to talk to small children, who might be like right here. This is like waving a flag, like, hello, small children here, right? Come talk to us. So if your kid is joining a Discord, If it's a moderated Discord, that is a markedly safer Discord, and especially if it's moderated by people you know, i.e. the school Minecraft Discord, if there is one, or the local library Dungeons & Dragons Discord, if there is one, right? So all through kind of COVID lockdowns, my kid was playing Dungeons & Dragons on our local public library Discord. Now, is that 100% guaranteed to be safe? Absolutely no bad things can happen? Of course not, right? But if I am a bad person with bad intent and I want to find children to talk to, I'm probably not going to register with a Skokie, Illinois Public Library Discord, give them my library card, and go on record as having joined that Discord, because there's so many unmoderated Discords I could go to accomplish the goal of finding children, right? I probably would not join a moderated Discord where it's also attached to my real life identity with my library card. No guarantees. Right? There's no guarantees anywhere. There's no guarantee on the playground that another kid will push your kid off the slide, that we don't avoid playgrounds because that can happen, right? But I think we have to look at relative risk, and like the risk of being, you know, in Minecraft with your 3 friends from school on Discord is no greater than using, you know, Google Voice to talk to them. But joining a Discord that's an interest-based or identity-based Discord when you don't know the people, it's something I would say for older kids. So if you're 17 and you're 18, or you want to join a Discord maybe for kids of a certain identity, like maybe neurodiverse identity or LGBTQ+, like that's a very different situation. But I would want the kid to be a little older, more savvy about who's in the Discord with them and what they disclose in that space. But for younger kids, I would try to stick with people we know. So maybe the voices are familiar to you. At the core, my philosophy is about mentoring and not just monitoring. We don't want to just use to track our kids. We don't want to catch them doing the wrong thing. Our goal should always be to teach them how to do the right thing, which includes repair, which includes acknowledging that whatever age your kid gets a phone, whatever age they text, whatever age they join any social apps, they are going to make mistakes, and that's part of learning, and that we are here to help them, right? And that we're here to learn ways of and have empathy for them, because it is challenging to be a kid, a tween, a teen these days. So mentorship is about being on our kids' side, helping them learn, right? It can be also about setting limits, but if we only set limits and we don't do anything to teach our kids how to be successful, how to problem solve, how to repair when you make a mistake in the group text, then we're missing a lot of what I think need to be doing, right? So I believe we need to be mentoring and not just monitoring. Unfortunately, when we just monitor, we're also sometimes our kids will go around us, right? Our kids will just sneak things. They will use a device we don't know they're using, and we won't have as much ability to help them because they haven't told us what they're doing, right? And this is surveillance, right? So we can put our kids on Life 360 and track them all over town. We can just find them on Find My iPhone. We could read out texts and relive middle school and have trauma. But we really want to think about the why. And this is also important with the grading app. If you find yourself just habitually checking the grading app because you can, and it's not helping you or informing you of anything new, and this is especially important for my middle and high school parents, maybe take it off your phone. If you are an anxious parent and you're checking the app like more than is helpful, or if it's getting in the way of their relationship with your kid or their teachers, or getting in between them in a way that's not helpful, take it off your phone so that you can only check on your computer. Do something to kind of interrupt that habitual checking, because for a lot of us, we're checking too much. Now, in every community, educators were like, some people never open it, never learn how to use it. Other people are checking it multiple times a day. If you're checking your kid's grade multiple times a day, that's probably more than you need to be doing that, right? And if your kid is really struggling with school, you also might want to think about who in the building can help them, because especially as they get to high school, your relationship with them might suffer if you're the one reminding them every time to turn in assignments. It's also not sustainable. Like, what is the long-term plan? If you are the thing between your kid and failing because you are reminding them to turn in every assignment, what is the plan for college? What is the, you know what I mean? Like, are you going to continue to do that? What about when they get a job? And I say this because people are kind of feeling like they're pulled into that role, right? And I was a kid who struggled with executive function. I was a kid with a messy backpack. I was a kid who lost assignments that I had done really well and would have done on, except I didn't turn them in, right? So I feel for that kid. But that kid may need someone in school helping them learn how to do that, or outside of school if you want to go the executive function coach route, but it may not be you. It may not be you, and especially if it's costing relationship points, if you're getting to the point where your kid is kind of pushing you away, then that may not be so good. All right. I want to make one more point about character versus consequences, and then I want to kind of turn us toward Q&A. I just want to say, in a lot of communities, like pictures or images of kids go around of kids like messing up, like a video of a kid vaping, or a video of a kid say, or a picture, say something bad, saying something offensive. We need to be really careful about gotcha culture and like canceling people or, turning our sort of frustration or disapproval all on a child or teenager. And I want to be really clear, I'm not advocating for teenagers or younger kids to get a free pass if they've caused harm. I think if we cause harm, we need to be accountable. We need to make restitution in our own communities. But if a 12-year-old messes up, I want them to move forward and do restorative work as a 12-year-old in their community now, but I do not want it to come back when they're 30 because they're 12. And that's not fair. It's not appropriate. It also very much heaps consequences very unfairly on some people and not others. And when we see kids messing up, you better believe there are other kids who have messed up in the same way who their video somehow didn't circulate. So unfortunately, when we tell kids, if you post that, you won't be able to go to Penn. If you post that, Princeton won't want you. We are actually saying to kids, don't get caught. That's what that message is. Don't get caught. Just do it anonymously. You're fine. It's cool. Because what you're saying to them is what I care about is the outcome. What you actually care about is, are you raising a human being that can be a good human being? So what we want to say to kids is do no harm. If you think that joke might actually be problematic, if you think it might be misogynist, racist, xenophobic, homophobic, don't post it. If you're not sure, and this comes up a lot with younger kids, like they're 6th graders, with meme culture and stuff, if you're not sure why something's funny, definitely don't post it. If you know that it's harmful toward an individual or a group of person, people don't post it, right? If you see somebody else messing up, somebody drunk at a party, somebody vaping, either think, how can I have space from this person? Or if this person needs help, how can I help this person? If your urge is to video and shame that person, rethink that urge, right? If somebody's drunk at a party and they're getting sick, like they need to go to the hospital, they need their parents called, they do not need you to video them and share it. We all need to think about who we'd want, like what we would want. And if something like that is going around the community, we do not want to be amplifying that, right? And so truly we want to be thinking about character, not just consequences. And anytime we see somebody else's kid mess up, even though we might be 100% sure that our kid would never, we can never be sure that our kid would never. And so we don't want to amplify somebody else's kid's mistakes. We want to think about how can we help in that situation, right? Or how can we, if somebody has made something harmful toward a group of people, how can we support those people, right? So if someone has said something that maligns a group of people or an individual, how can we help those people? Rather than focus on like, let's run that 14-year-old perpetrator through town with their head on a stake and be like, well, and rather we did teach you to. Let's assume like, they learned it from somewhere, what can we all be doing better? And meanwhile, some people are probably feeling pretty bad because of what has been said here. What can we do to help those people? Right? And so I just really want to emphasize that because the internet can become very quickly a place for piling on. I'm not a fan of piling on of anybody, but when I'm talking about children, I think we just have to just say no. Like, no matter what it is, like, we're not piling on to kids. We just don't do it, right? Because we all know better. Because we all grew up when, again, like, there were no videos made of, like, every dumb thing we said, right? And it's really important to remember that. Okay. I want to take questions. I'm going to put my first slide up, so if you want to get on my email list, you can. I send emails. I've been a little bit delayed in doing it in the last few weeks, but I usually send emails about once a month to my followers, either about my own research or sometimes other research that I'm reading, stuff where kids have written things as well, because sometimes teenagers come out with these awesome articles. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very about this about headedly Japanese blocky singing rate. So I have to say it she should take her positions on whereas established to like a good actually great using recipe is like Zach the parameter like example say dates where I just did this see especially with people like YouTube you could go out to hide this and also going to brace up their plays whether a passport sheet. So my approach so far, and I have to see your Lord poetry. My approach has been hard walking. Like you are up, I say that you understand and sip about so like yeah, this and just share the day where you're that today to some visually at the but like your eyes slowly grew. And I feel that that is the most like ties it like course of cause years. But I also see it that you're a kid with searches for you gaze at Pokemon. That Albert Mr. say, oh, Yuri Hamnes on Mr. any positive aspect. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I know it, and I think I mean some of the sort of culture, and I have a teenage boy in my house, and I see some of the stuff that's in his feed, even though that's not what he's sort of choosing or seeking. So I do understand that. I think it's really important to talk to our kids about things like toxic masculinity. Talk to them about the ways that any video content or social media content that's about denigrating another group of people, like even if it's like, oh, I'm lifting you up by putting these other people down, like that's a strategy, right? I mean, I think we're gonna like need to lean into these strategies about media literacy just more and more and more as the media landscape gets, I mean, it's already, we're in a tough situation. But and sometimes like I have a PhD in media studies, and then my husband is a journalist, and literally like we'll be talking to our kid, and I'm like, oh, that's a misinformation. And my husband was like, yeah, that's misinformation. And he's like, how do you know? And I'm like, trust us, this is like the one thing we know. Like we can't help you with trigonometry. We're totally clueless about chemistry. Like maybe I can help you with AP Go, but like if both me and your dad think there's some like serious problem with this information, like let's at least double check a source. But they don't have the life context to sort of check things. So I get it. And we did talk damage about like Snapchat and Instagram tonight, but I'm happy to take questions about those. But those are really tricky to manage too. I mean, Snapchat's got that map where you can see where all your friends are. Both of them are also scrolling based. So they've got reels, they've got things to pull you in. One kid I talked to at a school a few weeks ago was like, I wish I could text my friends in something other than Instagram. So I actually don't let it get pulled into reels and watching video content. But my friends are all texting me on Insta. Right? And that's tricky because a lot of us are in that boat. How many of you feel like you're getting messages from people on like 5 apps? Like I feel like half of my friends have hopped from Meta to Blue Sky the last week. I used to have a lot of people on Twitter. That's really different now. But I've still got people who DM me there. Then I got LinkedIn. People DM me on LinkedIn. They're like, I have no idea how to contact you. I'm like, how about DevorahHeitner.com? And there's the contact page. But people don't do that ever. Right? They always try you with LinkedIn, right? So, but anyway, the kids are in the same situation. They've got the friends who talk to them on Snap. My son's got his cross-country team Snapchat. There's the choir Instagram. There's, and he's not even like super involved in social media, but it's still very present in their lives. And so we need to help them kind of navigate that and navigate the pressures, especially to have a lot of followers. We need to help them recognize that when people are on there and they're kind of performing their happiness, right? People are kind of cropping the sadness and boredom out of their lives and showing these great moments.
Well, if they already have more on social media, but just regular text is like same problems and challenges that social media has. Because these kids, it's like being, well, kids behind a wall that's safe to be being in a boat. So you mentioned what's not blocking or leaving a group. They pick each other out. Like the thing to keep them out, and then come back then and kick somebody else out. But
They do that, yeah. Or they'll start a new group without somebody.
had team up. So I guess
These are old behaviors, though, for that age group, like especially middle school, who you get to sit with at lunch, who's your first best friend versus your second best friend, who's invited to this or that. Like all of that is not totally new. It's just happening in this new space. I'm not saying that this doesn't exacerbate it, but I'm just saying, like, it's not like we gave kids Instagram and they started excluding each other. But before that did happen. Like, y'all went to middle school, right? Like, was there something you were excluded from or excluded other people from? Even just a conversation, right? Where it's like, I'm going to talk to you. And kids will very, like, obviously be like, turn their back on someone, or something like that. Like, you just see it all the time. And so that's an age where that happens. So we can do a lot to try to help them with that, but also social media is more, I'm going to say, like a symptom than even a cause in that case. But it can be, if your kid is already struggling socially, can be a place that can be rough.
But I mean, Emerson, before we get to that, I think saying somebody's like a real, like a bullet, they never thinks, they call it team up. Would not just what they would say, gayappa. Like, then I think blocking that me kid is a good.
You can watch something. I'm just saying you want to give somebody a chance. Like, if they're doing something that, especially if it's just annoying, like the example I gave, like they sent me emojis or they texted you a little too late at night. Well, I would start by letting them know, hey, you can't text me at 10 o'clock at night. I'm not allowed to be on my phone after 9, and my phone was in my parents' room, and my dad got willing that because you texted me at 10. Like, I would start there. If someone is saying something really mean to you, you don't have to start at that place. You can be like, I'm cutting out contact. Absolutely. There are things that someone could say where that might be the first step, right? But if there's any doubt or if there's any like wiggle room in the relationship where you also get along some of the time, that's where I'm saying you also need to practice the even. In some ways, it's harder. Like blocking someone in some ways is easier than telling someone that you want them to change and standing up for yourself and, like doing that. But that's the work that helps us keep some of our friends, right? And we do need to kind of advocate for ourselves. But absolutely, there are things that, and there are times where you can say, you want your kid to block someone, but it also gets tricky if you're making that decision. It is better usually if they come to that conclusion. You don't want your kid sneak in contact with someone that you feel like is a really unsafe peer.
Photo 666.
Yes, 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 yes.
So I have a fourth grader, and I've been able to kind of minimize screens about what becomes a relationship at this time. She's been asking for it to messenger. She's first, second grade, these are friend habit. I allowed that, so I like impulse on these messenger for elementary stage. I also would love to hear your thoughts on like what is it that's kind of gets spring? It's like let's just say phones, but
Yeah.
and also for
With phones, I would say it's helpful to start to learn to text what you want them to be able to make their own plans. Like there comes an age, like say 8th grade or high school, where you're no longer dialing for play dates, where, all the people you have in your phone of like, that I still have from when my kid was little of like Josh's dad and Levi's mom become like, that would be ridiculous. Like if I told my kid, like my sophomore in high school, like, oh, I made a hangout for you this weekend with Levi, he would just be like, what in heck are you talking about? Like, you can't do that. Right? So I think it is really important that we kind of work our way back from like, at what point do we want our kid making their own social plans? At what point do we bring them into the family calendar, right? So they know like, oh wait, that night's grandma's birthday. I can't have a date that night or a plan with my other friend, right? And these kinds of things. And that maybe that's 8th grade for some kids. Some kids might be social butterflies and their friends might be blowing up your phone in 4th grade, in 5th grade, right? And so you really have to think about like, am I willing to let the kids' friends blow up my phone? And do I want to get my kid a more locked down version of the smartphone, like a Gab or a Pinwheel or one of these other phones that only texts and doesn't allow a browser? Do I want to get a smartphone and try to lock it down and not have a browser, not have YouTube, not have social apps, which you can do, right? It depends also how much of a hacker you have. If you have a little hacker, first of all, know that you're going to be in the really nice assisted living one day because your little hacker is like, probably like on track to do very well, right? But what you want your little hacker to have is like morality, right? And goodness. We really, really need some tech people with some morality and goodness. I'm going to say we really need that because that's a very powerful position in our society right now. But if you had a little hacker, you may not want to go with the lockdown smartphone because you may be able to quickly figure out how to, like there's videos on YouTube about not to do certain things. So I'm just saying like, you got to look at your old kid and also look at like, you don't have to go from no phone to a phone that they have 24/7. I still take my 15-year-old home at night, right? It sleeps downstairs. If I thought he was sneaking it would sleep with me, but so far we haven't had that problem. So it just sleeps, charges downstairs. It's there when he gets ready for school, right? Because sometimes we're not home when he gets ready. So I'm not going to like take it and then he doesn't have his phone for the next day. But it's just not something that I feel like he's ready to have overnight. Some 15-year-olds might be, right? But sleep is so crucial to our kids' physical and mental health. Like truly, if you have one hill to die on, how would make it sleep, honestly, like unplugging these kids at night if you do nothing else. Because it accomplishes a couple things. First, they get your sleep, which is so crucial. Secondly, the group text gets real ugly late at night, right? So anything you can do to like not have your kid on that device when they're super disinhibited and when they're with the kids who have the least supervision, that's a good thing, right? So keeping them off the phone late at night accomplishes a lot of that. With readiness for a phone, though, you could say you're ready for a phone, but you can only have it at certain times. You can also start with fewer contacts, but once you start with contacts that are peers, they're going to want more and more and more, because it actually is hard to like feel like you're excluding people, especially if you're one of those kids and that's very social. You could start letting them just text somebody on your phone, like maybe a cousin or someone where you're close parents, when you just let them text on your phone and just see how that goes. You can also see how your kid's doing in things like Roblox or the school chat or Google Docs before you greenlight texting, and kind of see like, where are they impulsive? Where is this going wrong? And just know too, with the phones overnight, another thing that I see a lot of is like kids will be in 5th grade or 6th grade and they're pretty alive to parental authority, let's say, and they put that phone in the drawer in their bedroom overnight, and their friends maybe are texting them late at night because they're 11. But you have to remember your kid will like maybe sometime soon be an 8th or 9th grader in love, right? And think about how often they might get up to check their phone. So you may want to make the rules for your 6th grader thinking 4 years ahead. Like maybe your 10th grader will be a very different person and you might not want us to have set up phone in the room overnight, even though your 5th grader actually truly might be like, I'm turning this off, I'm going to get you. I'm out, right? Because they're 10. But they won't always be 10. So it's just, you got to kind of sometimes think ahead as well. Because self-regulation is not like just a upward trajectory. It's more of a wavy line. Yeah. Yeah, so Facebook Messenger, I have used it with my own kid a little bit. We tried it during the pandemic and he lost interest when his friends left. My experience is any app, Facebook Messenger is tied to the parent's account. So theoretically, that's a safety thing in place. I would say any texting app is pretty equivalent, whether it's WhatsApp, texting in any app that's just texting. Once you get into like Instagram, that's a little different because you got the reels. So if you feel comfortable with your kid texting in Facebook Messenger and it's something they could do on a family shared device, that would be maybe a way to like experiment with texting. You could even let your kid know like, hey, let's just try this for a couple weeks, but I'm not 100% sold. So let's see how you do, right? But as much as possible, we want to be clear with our kids ahead of time. We don't want to read their text and be like, you're in trouble for language, or you're in trouble for this, or you're in trouble for that. As much as possible, we want to tell our kids in advance, like, this is my expectation of how you're going to act in these spaces. That said, if they mess up in a way you haven't thought of, obviously, they don't get to be like, well, it wasn't one of your 12 rules on my phone contract. You can still, because like one of your rules could be like, be a really kind person or something that covers a lot of ground, right? And then if, you feel like there's a misalignment there, you can pull it back. I also think taking away tech doesn't always work the way we think. And for a teenager, especially an older teenager, if they're really struggling with their mental health, I would loop in the therapist at that point and really talk about, is this risky to take it away? Like, I'm not saying you can't do it. I just think if you have a kid who's really struggling, you don't want to take away a lifeline where they're reaching out for help. So just think about like maybe working in collaboration with a mental health team at that point to think about like, what's the safe choice? Yeah.
One other big question. Do you see any research about more neurodivergent kids have moderate to severe OCD or anxiety that have been diagnosed at a much younger age that may are medicated, have not through therapy and all that kind of stuff? And I heard a lot of stuff you read things about as we hit puberty, obviously everything falls off the wagon. And then when you fast forward that, looping in frontal lobe not of early gets on track. I mean, do you have guidelines on they really shouldn't limit their time to 2 hours? Like we did a mental experiment this weekend. Let kid do whatever she wants. Yeah, but in terms of like, we had a bad day. It was a family bad day, so she'd have better if I like $5, okay? And she was an ass. So I was like, okay, well, we're gonna try 3 hours. 3 hours is like the max. Like she's not plenty, but she's really just not being, And he just said,
But you'll see that even with little kids, you'd be like 2 episodes of Dinosaur Train were fine. 3 were, in jerk territory.
research out there that says like neurodivergent kids with, psychic issues and mystical involvement age, really, you're just shooting yourself.
So there's some good research out there. Yeah, there's a really good specifically on autism, there's a really good book that just came out called Kids Across the Spectrums by Meryl Alper, who is a Boston-based scholar, and she did all this amazing research on kids with autism. That's also I would say also relevant to kids with like ADHD and stuff that's kind of like along the same spectrum. I wouldn't necessarily put anxiety and then quite in the same category, but I think it's there may be some other resources I can try to, if you write to me, I can try to help you find some others like high quality resources that are good about that topic. But I think we have to also just pay attention to our own experience as parents. And you see that a certain app is really not working out for your kid and that's making you like, it's, causing more problems and meltdowns, then that may not be a great app. And I also think we have to be forgiving of ourselves. Like I've interviewed families where the kids have such explosive behaviors that the only way that family could ever get out and see other families is one of their kids is on an iPad. Like, don't judge that family. That family might those adults might be so isolated because of their kids' behavior that they never get to see anybody. And like, that's the way they get to be in community. So I think it's really important that we don't look at other families and like, I can't believe right? Like, we don't know what decisions went into that. And I think with neurodiverse kids, there may be an especially strong affinity for tech. And in some cases, it can be an area of strength. And it can also be problematic in different ways. So it's tricky. Yeah. I'm sorry?
I said it probably lot better IQ, so I might do.
A lot of kids are really smart, and it is like, and people say like, oh, it's really great to have a gifted kid or a really smart kid, and it's like, yes, and it's a real PETA too, right? And so, like you have a kid, again, if you have a little hacker, if you have a kid who can end run around your technology limits, like, then that's a kid you have to really think again about how, but if you can motivate that kid to use tech for good, if that kid can be, go to grandma's house and be her tech support, if there's ways we can get that kid to do the cool things that they could do and like get them into computer science class and camp and all that, like that's really great. I feel like I'm getting the hook if I know, should we stop? Some of you get books if you want to come say hi to me when you get books or come say hi. I think that we're going to put the raffle numbers up. But I just want to say, go home and have conversations with your kids and any co-parents about this stuff. We're all figuring out together, and look around the room and see if you can talk to other parents in the community about this too. I think this is an area where we don't talk to each other enough. And it's really great to talk to other parents about like, what do you wish you knew before you got the PS Quarter? What do you wish you knew before you greenlit Minecraft or Snapchat? Like these are good conversations to have with other parents because they're living it too. Thank you so much.
Thank you to you. First, I want to apologize for two things. Can I say I'm sorry for two things? One, Dr. Batchelor reminded me, I didn't even introduce myself. I was so excited to introduce Devorah. My name's Scotty, and I'm the Director of Technology for the school district. One of the things that's really important to me since I arrived here 5 years ago is talking about digital wellness. Dealing with technology, I'm not the guy who says technology is the answer for everything. You'll probably never meet another technology director like me, right? I'm talking to my teachers, and we give all of our students devices, and I think if I'm walking down the hallway and I don't see all those devices open that we spent all that money on, I'm going to be okay. Like sometimes just get in a circle and talk to each other, like shut the lid, it's okay. So that's one thing in there. And then also, I'm sorry that sometimes I'm a bad model for your kids. I walk through the hallways of some of the schools and I'm going through my emails. They're not allowed to have their phones, but I'm on mine. So I'm sorry. But I'm thinking about us being models too, right? Our kids see all of our behaviors, things we ask of them, but they see us with our phones. They see us texting and driving, picking it up during dinner when we say dinner time is a screen-free time. And that's the easiest gift. That's the easiest first thing we could do. There's so many other things that we're dealing with. But we do that, right? So I'm sorry if I'm a bad model. I'll try to be better, I promise. A couple of other things. One of the other things we had done with Devorah, and that I didn't mention with a late night, she kind of mentioned it, a little bit of a tease, is we had some students join Devorah last night. So after we worked with the teachers, we actually recorded a session which we hope to air in March. So what you asked about old shows, do you remember TGIF on ABC? Yeah. So we're going to do kind of a TGIF thing. We hope to do it. If this doesn't work out well, don't tell anybody. Pretend I never said this. But we recorded it last night. Hopefully it's good. So we sat on a couch together and we talked with these students, and we did 2 programs, one for more elementary age students and one for more secondary age students. And then what we're going to do is we ask a question to families, and we're hoping that families can sit down on the couch together and talk. Like, let us be the person that spurs the conversation. If you say to your kid, like, let's talk about your cell phone usage, like, let us be the ones that force the conversation, that you could sit down together on a couch and have candid conversations about what are you seeing online, what are you doing, what are the rules that we can set. So that's another way that we're going to be working together on that. So real quick, and I'll put the RAFA numbers up across, is on our website, rtsc.org/digital wellness has some more resources for you, family tip sheets, some more resources from other people. We did a podcast a few years ago with the PTO, just families sharing ideas. We had a technology group together and just started putting ideas in the pot. It was about 2 years ago, and we started sending them out the Radnor Reader like weekly. We'll compile those and put those back together. Like, because what works in your home might not work in somebody else's home, or you might find something like, oh, that's a really great idea. We just wanted to like get those ideas rolling, because you might, like, I never thought of that. So there are some of those ideas on there. There's other blocks on there about screen-free areas, ways that you can control your own home internet coming in, ways that you can shut off the devices so you can see your specific device. So if you have Comcast or Fios, like, that's just built in and that's free. So I don't think you need to invest in like this big heavy tool, like that's automatically there. So there's a ton of resources. We continually update this with resources, tips, and ideas. So if some of those, I'm not saying they're all going to be helpful. You'll look at some of those and say, that won't work in my house. But maybe there's a good nugget in there. So we wanted to share that. All right. Last thing. We got 15 copies of the book. All right. If anybody's in the copyright, I pretend you never saw that, because I kind of hacked the graphic here. So there's our lottery numbers. I was going to say it benefits older Pennsylvanians, but I'm not going to say it. Okay, so there's our numbers. They all start with 971. If you have the ticket, I totally trust you. Devorah will be up here signing copies of her book. Or if you want to talk to her, want to talk to me, we'll be up here. But thank you so much for coming. Thank you for investing in this conversation. It's a continued conversation for the rest of adolescence. It's here. Thank you, everyone.